Julia Dedican, I'm a practicing lawyer, and at the same time I'm a PhD student, and my field research is related to explainability of AI, and therefore this will be the central topic of my presentation. But in general, today I would like to connect the dots, what kind of artificial intelligence we are talking about today, why it is important, what is explainability, and why it is necessary for everyone. There you see various types of AI. Don't try to read it. I will guide you through it briefly. Probably you have heard from media that AI has been on a AI has been one of the subjects of discussions, for example, in the EU and of course in the other parts of the world for already more than 5 years. And it is used widely, but some people still confuse that AI is something like super machine, super computer which will take over the world. No, at this moment we are talking about AI, which is a predefined specific task, which is defined ahead and then solved by an AI system. And AI systems are widely used, as I mentioned, in various areas. When you are applying for a credit, it's used for credit scoring or insurance scoring. It can be used in heavy machinery. It can be used in self-driving cars, in predicting, at workplace when applying for a job, or for example in sports when predicting some outcomes of games and things like that. Of course in games, in communication, social media, when we are using TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the feed is adjusting according to our preferences. And in all those cases, it is important that AI is used by us as humans and is understood, because it is possible that AI is biased. It can discriminate. It sometimes is created so that it is opaque, it is not understandable, nor by us as end users, nor by the creators themselves. If we imagine how the AI system is developed at the beginning, if it is programmed, for example, then it is trained based on the scope of data, and then it is ready to work and use our data and provide the outcome. And the important part is what kind of data is used for training of AI. One example from the US. In criminal justice in the US, AI is used for deciding whether to allow people who are at the moment in prison, whether to allow them to leave the prison earlier. And AI decides, not the judges. And how it is made and how the AI can decide whether the person can leave the prison earlier or not. One of the criteria which was discovered later was that actually the AI was trained on database, on the scope of data, where statistics show that crimes were committed by dark-skinned persons more often than the white-skinned person. So irrespective of the current state of this individual, which is being decided, upon which the decision is being made, this statistics has been taken into account. Is it fair? No. Would you want to be a subject of such decision, being a dark-skinned or Latino person? No, of course not. And therefore, it is very important to prevent such cases. And here you can see potential results, what can be done by the biased or opaque artificial intelligence. It can be actual damage, like physical damage. Imagine the large machine doing wrong things in wrong situations. And for example, it is still a very confusing and complicated ethical problem for self-driving cars, which is not solved at the moment. Imagine if you're a passenger of the self-driving car, it is so-called trolley problem, when there is an accident situation in the street and you are there, one person in the car, one person is in front of the car, and one is on the left side, one on the right side. People with children, people with baby carriages, 10 pedestrians, you alone in the car. And the car needs to take decision who to save. You as a driver, those 10 people, that mother with a carriage, or this one pedestrian with a dog, for example. And this is a very heavy, very complicated moral decision to make. And plus harm, negative legal consequences as being kept in prison for longer time than necessary. And manipulation, discrimination, which can be used, for example, for manipulating outcome of elections, which is time to time very common problem all around the world. If Facebook or Instagram or any other social media is adjusting its feed based on certain aspects, or your previous searches, or your gender, your location, fitting you, some specific political parties, for example, or some extremist content, it even may lead to extremization of the society and actually leading it one way or another. So, let's take a look on this picture and see yourself how biased can be the artificial intelligence mechanism. This is a research made by researchers of the University of Toulouse in France in 2018. And here you can see an animal. And it's your decision to make whether it is a husky dog or it is a wolf. And the same task was defined for the artificial intelligence system. And the system decided that it is a wolf. What would you say? Maybe you could say, yes, it looks like a wolf. It is in the natural environment, and it looks kind of like a wolf. On the other hand, it looks also like a husky. It has this specific dark nose and also spiky ears and different color of eyes, which is quite typical to huskies. What was the result of this AI decision? The AI system said it is a wolf. And why so? Because the background. Because the data on which the AI system was trained contained so many pictures of wolves being somewhere around when surrounded by white snow, so that the decision was made that this specific husky dog is a wolf only because of the snow around. This is something very illogical from the human perspective, but this can be the case for artificial intelligence that doesn't have any cognitive experience such as we have. Therefore, the EU comes forward and now is planning to regulate use of AI. Probably you have heard of that. And in comparison to other parts of the world, again, EU will be the place when things will be regulated. If we take a look around, we can say that at the moment, there is no place in the world where the whole spectrum of AI development process would be regulated, starting from development, training, and application to the end users. Some of the parts are regulated somewhere. For example, in France, administrative decisions made by municipalities, made by courts or institutions are regulated. Already mentioned by the previous speaker, GDPR regulates certain aspects of profiling when personal data is used. But the EU plans to regulate, so to say, the whole process. And it distinguishes 4 categories of artificial intelligence systems, starting from the very high risk and ending with low risk. I will not go into detail today. Main things, probably, which need to be stressed out that, as usual, probably, EU wants central thing to be implemented in this legal act that at all times, AI systems must respect rule of law, human rights as a central part, and puts human in the center of AI. Like, each and every AI system needs to serve human and includes principles of transparency, explainability, and security as also very important principles for AI. I will tell you a little bit more about explainability. It is also called XAI. It is a set of processes and methods which describe how the decision is being made, in simple words, so that you know how the decision is made and what is the main criteria for the AI to decide whether, for example, whether to grant you certain social goods or not, or whether you are fit for this job position or not. And the main reason for that is to build trust, because if we don't know how the system works, we don't trust it, we don't rely on the outcome, and we don't feel secure ourselves. And now comes the question, actually, what is the explainability and what is explained? And here we are actually in this situation when explainability not only is being defined by lawyers, but also computer science is researching explainability as such, which is what is explained, what is being explained from psychological perspective, when something is clear to a person. And the potential AI regulation, which has been already published 1 year ago around this time in April 2021, does not really define in detail what is explainability, but we need to understand that explainable is something different for different people, and in the process of development of AI, so many people and different professionals are involved, starting from coders, from those who hire those coders, from institutions or companies who order AI-driven product. For example, if a court of a country orders AI system to make decisions or to sort out the court practice, so to be able to distinguish the most valuable court decisions, also the judges themselves need to know how the AI system works, because it would be useless, I would say, if judges just rely on one button, because you need to know what is the basis of your decision as a person responsible for the decision. Also, of course, end users, people like you and I, need to know. And also, if we want to defend our rights, also our lawyers, as people who are not so close to technology as coders, for example, need to understand based on what the decision is made. And the courts themselves, who are oftentimes even more far away from the field of IT, need to know and understand what the explainability is, how the system works, and why we need this or that decision. So yes, this was a brief run through the world of AI and explainability. And I finished with an open question to you, which you can answer yourself in your head. What is explainable? What is explainability to you? And when something is understood by you as a human being, as a service user, and as a professional in your position. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Vlad, you can join us. Yeah, it's pretty scary, given the fact that if we look at how you can train an artificial intelligence, machine learning, with the process of machine learning, if you are planning to take over the world, jumping ahead to the next one, this discussion is about sustainability, you could wipe out the human race because it's a virus for this planet, right?
I try to be not to be scary, but just be
realistic. It's the time to be scary because we're in the afternoon already. So, Vlad, have you liked this presentation?
I do. Oh, it's working okay. Yeah, it's good, and I especially enjoyed as a marketer and also as the CEO of a company which also like to use the fancy term AI. and that actually nobody has AI. It's really it's just a smart algorithm. But us being marketers, if we just call this as a program, nobody will buy it. If we call it artificial intelligence, everybody will start buying it because it's fancy. That's also causing problems because now everybody thinks it's somebody thinking instead of them, just people doing programs. And it will probably, as I can see it already with GDPR stuff, that when it comes to AI, it will boil down to the definition of the AI according to the European law. If they will be able to define it, then they will be able to apply it. And then we'll say, okay, is this a complex enough machine learning algorithm to be defined by AI as AI and then be applicable to law or not? And that's where everybody will basically stop. Because even if something as simple as privacy and 2 years being actually used and applied and companies being fined, some things cannot be defined yet. And we are in the situation like doing some privacy-related stuff. Nobody can tell us specifically if what we do is GDPR compliant or not. So we'll just leave it to our customers and their lawyers. Some of them define it this way, some of them define it the other way. Same as the AI. But now, when it comes to coding, it's even more complex subject matter. So who will be able to validate the decision about if it is artificial intelligence or, let's say, machine learning quite complex enough? Because if we call it real artificial intelligence, there is still a simple Turing test, but you should be able to sustain talk with the human. And probably self-driving car will never be able to sustain talking with humans, so it's just a complex program. So I enjoy it because I don't see how somebody can define the measurability of being complex or not complex. So it probably will end up, if this technology will affect human lives, like self-driving cars, maybe medicine, maybe something else, then it will be regulated. If it will not affect human lives directly, like Facebook algorithm, which indeed affects, but it will not be regulated.
So before you give a reply, I'll give you the devil's advocate over here, of course, because I don't like politicians. So if it's regulated by politicians, we are doomed. Basically, like GDPR was amended like 2,500 times or something like that before we got the final version. Julia, we are not against you in this. It seems like we're the two people here talking about.
I really enjoy actually being in this interdisciplinary field because I really see the challenges. And so far, I don't see the answer to your questions. I have seen 3 different definitions of what is AI. One of created by EU, one of the United Nations, and the other of EU's OECD. And they all are different. And already now, when there is no legal binding rules, you can see that there are issues. There are issues. Some of the terms are too wide, too broad. The others are too narrow because if the lawyers, if it's not written, then the law isn't applicable. And then sometimes we can go in the other direction that if the technology doesn't fall under the terminology, then it will be out of scope of the law, irrespective of the fact that it's actually AI. And this being such an interdisciplinary, it's such a challenge for all those involved professionals to distinguish. Because at this point, I see no chance for a lawyer or a judge to distinguish whether this technology is or is not an AI. And this is, I think, if such regulation would be adopted, then experts in the field of AI will be very often guests to the courts, but please try to help us determine how and what this technology do.
Right, so let's touch base on tasks, human tasks and machine learning, artificial intelligence, AI tasks. Where is the human better, or where is the artificial intelligence better?
Usually when such question is asked to lawyers, and typically it's asked What do you think your profession will distinct in upcoming years? I think those professions which require higher level of, first of all, of thinking, of human rationality behind it. These will not distinct, but regulating AI, which will affect humans, of course, yeah, there is a need behind that. But the line where it does and where it doesn't is very blurry.
Well,
Yeah, I actually think quite differently. Because, as I mentioned, for me, artificial intelligence and machine learning is basically a way to describe a process. And as humans, we were applying this for many years, so it's not like 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, it was before. It was when we started to do math, when we started to do industrial manufacturing, when we started to do science. It was just taking a process, describe it, and then follow step by step. At some point of our evolution, say, okay, then instead of us doing the things according to the process, because it was well written, let's machine do the same process. And that's when it started. So eventually, any task that can be quantified by process and programs, like driving a car, that's a description of things, what you do, what you don't do in specific situations. And probably in the end, self-driving cars will be better than humans because they will not do things like us people may do sometimes because we think we're smart enough. What will be left there is tasks that can be defined as a process. And it doesn't matter whether it's like education, medicine, law, or science, whatever. If it's going to be described by a simple process, then it will be left by humans. But eventually, that's the nature of our civilization, to replace humans with machines. When the first ape took the first stick, that's when we started to use machines. So eventually we'll try to remove as much repeatable or explainable work as possible from our everyday lives. And then the big question, what people will do with that free time. And that's where we're going to the sphere of philosophy.
sounds fair. So basically, AI will not replace humans ever, or it's just a matter of time, or AI will someday govern.
AI will replace the explainable tasks people do. But it's happening already. When sometime down the road, humans will decide that AI can replace governing, it may happen. But I don't think that we will see that, because also humans too much like the power and control to give it to a machine.
All right, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I can agree that we already are seeing, like in manufacturing processes, we clearly are seeing AI replacing people. But for those professions which require more thinking, that AI will be just like assisting tool to reduce time and to do things more efficiently.
Virtual assistant.
Yes,
It will be
virtual
called
assistant.
AI assist human decisions. That's already the terms marketers are coining.
Well, I can tell you from my own experience that some people need this type of assistance either way. All right, so I don't know if there are any coders or artificial intelligence experts in the house, but I would like to ask about the transparency of AI decision making. Is there a transparency in this process on how it was created, or what's the actual mission of it?
I can only tell from this end user perspective and legal perspective that transparency is necessary to be aware of what kind of decisions being made, and in hand with explainability, why it is made, based on what criteria, so that we can make sure that there is no mistakes, so that we can maybe later submit a claim against this decision if it is legally binding something, or at least find out what is being done with me, with my life, with certain aspects of my job, things like that. or with my timeline. From technical perspective, I would rather also know it.
I would say it's a very funny question because, of course, it's 100% possible to make it explainable because it was written by developers who follow some, at least for now, until the programmers will start to write programs, then it will not complex. But it was written by specific people with specific specification. There is a code that governs how it is happening. However, first, who will understand it? Or who will confirm that the human language explanation given by somebody who created this code actually corresponds to the actual code that is happening? And then who will be able to validate that it is actually working, like it was explained? And practical answer, because we used very basic machine learning that checks like 3 different variables and then makes a decision on what to do with, let's say, click on the ad. And we log all the decisions, and we log all the data points that were made into making those decisions. None of the customers, or well, most of the customers, never asked why the decisions were made. And those who asked, we opened the code with them. So, okay, these are all the logs of the decisions. And said, wow,
I understand.
And what should I do with that? I said,
now
well,
I get
that's
it.
the data points. That's the idea. That's the data points that we put into the program. That's why we made those decisions. Okay. Can we refresh it? Yes, we can. So we drop just the accumulated data, start from scratch, and then it's following the same rules. Collects different data sets, works slightly different, everybody's happy. So the key principle is explainability. Somebody can do it. What then? So what is the purpose? Just to have a long document, extra paperwork, extra compliance, then we'll do another startup that will do KYC for machine learning explanation and confirm that it's still written logically. Then fine, we can do it, but for any practical applications, I doubt.
All right, so any closing remarks on this?
I think with this explanation, for example, you mentioned 2 things, and there it shows exactly this transparency when you open up the code and look at this, and if you don't understand, never mind. But explainability that then would explain, and then will be a companion material how to read what you see, for example, or what it means. And yes, I can agree that it will be the same thing with privacy policies. Unless there is an issue, nobody reads them, and only if there's some actually things happening which are not in, which are working, for example, against us, only then we go there, we read the privacy policy, we consult, we look through, and then we try to figure out what has happened and whether it is even written there and what are my rights and things like that. But I believe in that yes, it will be something similar like GDPR, which will cause much paperwork.
And so it always leads to questions when why we do it at all. My idea is that because European Union is an amazing place where our government cares for people and tries to protect them. Because, yeah,
By all means, yeah.
By all means. Because they don't, well, they understand people good enough to know that they will make stupid things. So they try to prevent people from making stupid things through regulations, which doesn't prevent people making stupid things, but is now regulated, and the blame will go on the people because they broke the regulation.
May I ask? At this moment, EU, how to say, it says that by implementing AI regulation, it will establish these rules, and in order to be able to compete with other leading regions, with China, with the US, would it help or would it be a burden?
It doesn't really matter because it all comes down to if you do something big. Because when you compete with China, it's not about us, where we have these 3 data points. It's about the system that uses active face recognition and people who do all the things for WeChat. For companies who operate on that scale of technology, hiring 2 more people to do 100 pages of paperwork, fine. They have the money, they have the resources. Then for government, hiring a commission, hope they will not put their service into the basement so it will flood it when they have a rainfall. Hiring a couple more people who will check all those documents and say, yeah, good, fine. And like I said, then we will have the artificial or the process that will just load documents, text will be recognized, key data points will be identified, and then the machine will say, yeah, this is compliant. Everybody will be happy. Will it impact the computation of the abilities? No, because it will be just extra hassle that small companies will try to ignore to their best possible, and nobody will bother them. And big companies will hire people to follow the rules. Like in our company, I'm also data protection officer, and so I'm somebody else and somebody else. Again, when we grow up, we'll hire a data protection officer who will make sure that we do the same, like not a dedicated function, because the scope of things will grow. Same happen with artificial intelligence. So sorry, I'm very skeptical of the practical implication.
So every time we do an artificial intelligence panel discussion, it's like, does anyone know that the track from Jay-Z, Niggas in Paris, when they say we are going gorillas, and somebody asks, what does that mean? Because nobody knows what it means, but it's provocative. It's like artificial intelligence, nobody knows what it means, but it's provocative. You know, like we're talking about it 24/7 nowadays.
Because it's marketing, like say quality algorithm, there's nothing broken.
So to wrap things up, this is an introduction to the next big trending keyword of our century, sustainability. And we are going to invite the next panel on stage. I would like to thank Julia and Vlad for this awesome session. And invite Camille from Rocket Vilnius.